I want to talk about a very important leadership issue, and that's buy-in. Obviously we think of Jocko Willink and the other leaders on your team as having combat experience, and people's lives are on the line is what you're talking about with your experience. But I think leaders everywhere are going, boy, I tell you what, I just don't have the buy-in that I need. How do you take that on from your perspective? How do you get buy-in across the board?
Yeah, this is something that people struggle with all the time. And actually, the answer is surprisingly simple. And that is, if you want your team to buy in, let them come up with a plan. Let them do the creative process. Let them buy into something that they made up. So, for instance, Ken, if we were going to run a project or let's say a mission, some kind of a tactical mission, and I said, okay, Ken, I'm your boss. This is the target you've got to hit. This is the people I want you to take. These are the vehicles I want you to use. This is the route I want you to take in. This is how I want you to take down the building. This is the route I want you to use back here. If I gave you the whole plan, well, whose plan is that then?
Yeah, it's yours.
It's my plan. So even though, I want you to buy into my plan, it's my plan. So you get out there in the field and now you hit an obstacle, whatever it is. There's something comes up. And how motivated are you really to overcome that obstacle if you're dealing with my plan, which, by the way, you might hold a little bit of a resentment because I'm forcing this plan down your throat. So now you hit your first obstacle and the first thing you do is go, look, Jocko didn't think of this in his plan. See, his plan wasn't good. I'm just going to go back to base without completing the mission. And then you come back to base and you say, hey, Jocko, you had a bad plan. You should have listened to me. So how do I get you to get buy-in? I say, hey, Ken, here's the target we want to hit. Can you come up with your best plan? Let me know what you want to do and how you want to execute it. Now you go to your team, and you get together. You come up with a plan that you created, and you bring it back to me. And maybe I got to adjust it a little bit. Maybe I make some small corrections to what you've got. But broadly, it's your plan. And now when you go out in the field, it's your plan. You're completely bought in because you created it. And what happens when you hit an obstacle? You either go over the obstacle, around the obstacle, or you go through the obstacle. And that's the way you create buy-in. And it's the thing that intimidates, I think, leaders about that is they think there's two things that they might think. Number one is that if I let them come up with a plan, then they won't see me as the leader. And that's not true at all. That's patently false. As a matter of fact, when you give people some room to work, they actually respect you more as a leader. The other thing that people think is, if I let you come up with a plan, Ken, you're going to come up with something that's so wildly crazy that it'd be nothing close to what I would want you to do. That's also untrue. I mean, we're in the same business. We're working together. We're working together all the time. We have a history. We know what works and doesn't work. You're going to come up with a plan that's pretty close to what I came up with. And by the way, if it is so drastically different, I can, as the boss, say, hey, we need to take another look at this. Or what about these things that you might not have thought of? Or we can talk through it to get you to a solution that's closer to what I think and you will think is going to work.
I want to do a follow-up on buy-in. I think that's really, really good, but I want to do a follow-up, and pardon me for borrowing maybe from a military example here to the best of my ability. This is like from watching movies, unfortunately. So, what happens when you've been given a mission? So it's coming from headquarters or from your commanding officer, and it's like, Jocko, I need you and the team to go do this. And you instantly know, or at some point there is a potential for huge sacrifice and loss here. Now, in the business world, we're not talking about loss of life, but it could be painful, and there could be, but we've got to take that hill, if you will. How do you get buy-in there, where it's not just so much about, hey, get them in on the plan, but when everyone on the team realizes this could be hazardous, there will potentially be some losses, but it's just something that has to be done. What do you do there?
Well, first of all, when you're going on combat operations, it doesn't matter what you think. There is always a possibility to take catastrophic losses. And when we were working in Iraq, if you roll over an enemy IED, an explosive device, an improvised explosive device in the road, you could lose 8 guys in an instant. And that could happen on any operation from a high level, high risk, let's say direct action raid to capture or kill a bad guy, or a logistics route where you were just going to pick up some water. It could happen on either one of those. So there's going to be risk in every combat operation, just like there's risk in things you do in business. Now, if I am being directed to do something that I don't think is smart, well, I'm going to raise my hand and I'm going to say, hey, boss, here's what you're telling us to do. Here's the impact it's going to have. There's a huge risk for catastrophic problems or losses. And I'm going to say, here's another proposal. Here's another way that we could get this mission done. Let me just put this really, really simple way. There's no boss that is going to order me to do something that you're going to take massive casualties without being able to mitigate the risk. Right. And it's the same thing if you were working for me, Ken, and I said, hey, Ken, I want you to do this. I want you to go and do this with your clients. It's going to cost us a lot of money. We're not going to make any profit, and we're probably going to lose some business while we do it. Why would I tell you to do that?
Right.
Why would any business leader tell anyone to do that? And it's the same thing in the military. The idea of military guys being ordered to do something that is going to cause catastrophic loss of life for no reward is not really true. Mm. Now, can there be situations where you have a target of strategic value, or you have something that is strategically important to an entire war, and someone needs to go and execute that mission? Yeah, it is possible. And sometimes the risk can be very high. And in those cases, you weigh the risk versus reward, and you mitigate as much risk as you can, and then you go execute the mission.
Yeah, good stuff there. All right, let's move into another area that's just sticky and stinky for leaders as well, and that is tough conversations. So this is confrontation maybe for somebody who just is not naturally averse to, or actually does not enjoy confrontation. Like, it comes easy to people like me. It's just part of this contact sport, but they struggle with it. Or we see a lot more of these stories now that, hey, you can fire a customer if the customer's just wrong, because sometimes they are wrong. You say, hey, you just, hey, get out of here. But it's a tough, messy conversation. Talk to us about that.
So I got asked this the other day, actually, and it's pretty interesting, because the fact of the matter is, in not just my career in the SEAL teams, but my whole life, I haven't had a lot of really tough conversations. I've had a few, and I'll tell you why. The reason is because I don't mind tough conversations at all. And so my recommendation is you have the tough conversations early. And the mistake that leaders make is they don't want to have that, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, they don't want to have that tough conversation when it's a level 1 or a level 2. So they hide from it. They get scared of it. They don't want to confront the person. And so they let it go. Well, now, a week goes by, a month goes by, and things continue to move in the wrong direction. And now that uncomfortable conversation has moved to a 4 or a 5. And by the time, and they still avoid it, they still don't want to have the confrontation. By the time we get to a level to where the person actually has to talk to the individual, now we're at a point where this is a level 10 hard conversation. And that's what makes it so challenging. So I recommend to people all the time, it's just like any other problem that you might have in your business or in your life. If you ignore the problem, it's not going to go away. It's actually going to get worse. And if you have a tough conversation that you need to have, the longer you wait to have it, the tougher that conversation is going to get. So, if you were working for me and you made a mistake or you showed up late for work, I could have a real quick and easy conversation and say, Ken, hey, are you good? I mean, you were late for work today. I mean, is everything all right? Are we good? And you say, oh yeah, whatever. You had a flat tire or whatever the case may be. And that's cool. That's great. You realize that, oh yeah, Jocko's paying attention to what I'm doing. And so, okay. But if I don't say anything to you, well, then a couple days later, you could be late again. And now it's a little bit harder of a conversation because now you're consistently late. And we could go all the way. If I don't say anything and you're late 10 times, the conversation that I need to have with you is almost like you're fired.
Yeah.
And I let it get to that. So if you want to have less tough conversations, have the tough conversations early. Just like if you want to have smaller problems, deal with the problems as quickly as you can. Yeah.
I want to do a follow-up on that. What's your philosophy on letting people go? When is the right time? Do you have a long leash because you're having these conversations, or is it a pretty regimented amount of time? This is how we're going to handle problems, and if it doesn't get better, we're going to quickly move on. What's your take?
I mean, it's actually a great follow-up question, because it's the same type of theory in that if you're late once, and I can say, hey, Ken, come on, you need to be at work on time. And if you're never late again, we don't have a problem anymore. if you're late again, that the conversation becomes a little bit more stern. Hey, Ken, that's 2 times in 2 weeks. Everyone's sitting around here waiting for you in these meetings. That's costing us time and money. You need to show up on time. Hey, and you might say, hey, Jocko, I'm sorry, I had some things going on. Won't happen again. Doesn't happen again? Great, no problem. We can move on. If it happens again, now all of a sudden I got to put some paper in front of you, and I got to make sure I'm being perfectly clear as a leader that you understand it. Hey, Ken, I know we just had a brief conversation the last couple times you were late, and maybe I'm not making myself clear enough, but here's what I'm doing. I wrote this down. I want you to sign this piece of paper that says, hey, at our company, we are on time. That's what we do. And if we aren't on time, there's going to be consequences. And maybe that's what it took. And maybe I wasn't strong enough in the first conversations. And now you realize and you go, hey, Jocko, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was that big of a deal. No problem. And now you're never late again, right? Maybe it isn't strong enough for you. Or maybe you're a person that isn't adapting to what I'm trying to tell you. And so now you're late again. And I've got to come in with a piece of paper that says, hey, that was your 5th time being late. And this is what's going to happen if you're late again. You're either going to get demoted or you're going to get docked for pay or possibly you're going to be terminated. Now, that might be it. You go, I don't want to lose my job, Jocko. I will never be late again. I'm going to set 3 alarm clocks. We're good.
Right.
And that's great. And that may work. Or you might be just a person that needs to be really learn a lesson. And you're going to learn that lesson when you get terminated. Now, in both those cases, again, going back to the other question, if I wouldn't have said something for those first 5 conversations, and the first thing I did was come up to you and say, you were late 5 times, you're fired. How am I going to feel about myself? I'm not going to feel good. And the reason I'm not going to feel good, and this is why people have a hard time actually firing people, is because I know that if I didn't say anything to you, if I didn't give you any precursors, if I didn't give you any advice, and I didn't coach or mentor you into what you needed to do, and all I did was just wait until the last moment to fire you, I know that I have been a bad leader. And so it's going to feel bad when I fire you. Now, that can happen at any time, right? That can happen at any time. So if I do the other thing, which is I have good conversations with you the whole way, and I go through the process of coaching you and mentoring you and telling you what's what, by the time I'm getting to actually letting you go, when you come into my office that last time after you've been coached and warned, you know what's coming.
That's right.
I know what's coming. And we both walk out of there respectfully, knowing that I did what you did, and you know that the person to blame for this is not me. The person to blame for this is you. You had every opportunity. You were warned several times, and you gotta get your act together. And I wish you best of luck on your next job.
Yeah. I want you to talk to leaders right now about developing other leaders. What can we learn from the military about preparation, readiness, teaching, guiding, pushing out there, letting them begin to lead on their own so that you're constantly moving men up the ranks? I think that's something that we can really admire and take from the military. So in a corporate or small business setting, what can we learn from the military on developing leaders?
Well, you actually, in your question, you actually answered part of it. For me, the answer, which is if I want somebody to step up into a leadership position, I'm going to put them in a leadership position. I'm going to move them up. I'm going to bring them to a spot probably just outside their comfort zone, maybe even just outside their capability, but I'm going to put them in a position where they're going to start to lead things. And if you want to develop leaders, put them in leadership positions. That's what you do. And I'll tell you what, this doesn't only work with the good guys, your front runners, your high potential people. I've done this with problem children of mine in the past, guys that weren't performing well, negative attitude, thinking that they could run things better. I said, oh, well, you got an attitude like you can run things better. That's great. I need people that can run things better. Why don't you step up and take control of this next mission? And we'll see how that goes for you. And I'll tell you what, one of 2 things is going to happen. Either one, they're going to realize that it's a lot harder than they thought. They're going to get humbled and they're going to ask for help, which is a positive thing. Or they're not going to ask for help because their ego gets in the way and they're going to fall flat on their face, which is also humbling, which is also a cure for arrogance and bad attitude. Yeah. So both those solutions work out pretty well.
Okay, I love this. I want to stay here for a minute because I want to play the cynic. I absolutely agree with what you're saying. But we got people listening and watching right now. They're going, wait a second, Jocko, they're not ready. I don't know if they're ready. You're telling me to put them in there in leadership, and I don't know if they're ready. Why?
Yeah. Now, of course, when you put them in there, you monitor, you pay attention. Sure. You're not putting them in there, shutting the door and letting them come back 2 weeks later and see what happened in the office. No, that's not what I'm talking about. But you do need to give them enough room to maneuver, enough room to learn. You can't just be the easy button. And the first question, when I was a task unit commander, so when I was in charge of 2 SEAL platoons, sometimes my platoon commanders would come in and ask me a question, hey, Jocko, how do you think we should do this operation? Or what do you think I should do with this guy in this situation? And I'd say, get out of my office. Go figure that out. You're a platoon commander. Go figure that out. You tell me what you want to do and come back and I'll tell you if I agree with you or not. And that is the way you train people, because if you're the easy button for your team, guess what? They're going to get trained and conditioned to use that easy button. And not only are they going to come to you with everything, they're also not really learning to make decisions for themselves. So even though you're playing a little devil's advocate, it's the solution still holds true for sure. You want to get these people into those leadership positions. Again, do you want to risk huge capital or clients that, would I assign a guy to lead a project that's a huge client that we've never worked with before and I want to knock it out of the park? Would I assign a new leader to take that job instead of the experienced one? No. But if I had a small client coming on board and we didn't see much potential, but I wanted to give these guys, a shot, I would put a new guy in charge of that. And then I'd go ahead and closely monitor him and make sure that if he was going to fall flat on his face, I wouldn't let him do it. I'd maybe let him step out of the lines a little bit, then I'd bring him back in the lines and make sure that he's moving forward.
Yeah. I love the approach of what you're giving to us, because it goes back to the first part of our conversation, which is buy-in. When you send that platoon leader back out and say, you come up with your own plan, then tell me your plan, then I'll speak into it. What you are doing is you are empowering that young man to begin to use his unique perspective through his skills, through the way he sees things. And now all of a sudden you've got a stronger whole because you've got multiple voices when you really need them. Is that right? Am I learning that there? Am I connecting the dots?
You're absolutely learning it right. And there's an added benefit to this. If you come up with a plan, when you bring it back to me, I have a detached look at it. I have a higher altitude view. Yeah. I'm going to see things that I wouldn't have seen if I had been in the room staring at the maps and the charts this close. I'm not going to see everything. Yeah. But when I let you plan it, it's like everybody watching football on Sunday afternoon up in the stands. They see what the coach should be doing. They see what the players should be doing because they're not in the game. Of course, it's different when you're in the game, and that's the same thing with planning missions and planning operations and planning projects. If you get so close into the game and you're on the field and you're shooting and moving or you're blocking and tackling yourself, you can't really have the vision that you need as a leader to make the call and see things that the guys on the field aren't able to see.